there's a big emotional aspect because you grow this attachment to a person and you want to help them out.
Yes, definitely.
One thing that's really interesting is that sometimes when you study patients, friends in this case, you can take that knowledge and apply it to, we can say like a control, or someone who's just a person who doesn't have diabetes, or is not, or he might, it has nothing to do with kidney disease, just a normal person, maybe a teenager, early 20s. And then, one example is Angel, right? Like you looked at, hey, look, this kind of stuff works. But then said, you know what, I'm just going to apply this to my life, and then I lose all this weight, I feel better, and so on and so forth. So are there any lessons that you can take from like thousands of patients you've seen and directing the clinic and so on, where you say, you know what, these few things, if a person applied to their life, no matter what age they are, it would really like kickstart their metabolism or their quality of life, and they just kind of like, they'll become upbeat, like they saw you and when you walked in, like why is she changing? So like, what happened to her? So are there any tidbits you can give us?
For fasting or for diet?
In general, health-wise. So for example, nutrition or, fasting would be one aspect, or anything that has to do with day-to-day life.
I think just cutting out snacking and just getting, mindful about food. That's what we hear from patients so often. They're like, now that, we think about it, we're not really hungry at lunchtime. It's just lunchtime, and we've been so conditioned to eat and eat and eat. So we joke with the patients, when you go to eat, have a little conversation with your food and ask yourself if you're really hungry in the first place. And most often they realize that they're not. So just being mindful. I think people just eat mindlessly, and we hear that time and time and time again. And just being mindful too of, okay, if you are hungry, how is this food going to affect me? So we really encourage patients to talk to their food. How am I going to feel after eating you? Are you going to emotionally make me upset? Am I going to feel guilty for having put you in my body? How am I going to feel in half an hour? Am I going to be bloated? Are you going to spike my blood sugars, and am I going to be tired? Because if I've got a lot of stuff to do later on in the day, I don't want to be tired. I don't want to be bloated. I don't want to be miserable. Or am I going to feel great? Am I going to, are you not going to raise my blood sugar levels? Are you not going to raise my insulin levels? Are you not going to cause me to be tired or bloated, and I'm going to get all this nutrients from you, and I'm not going to regret having eaten you, and then things like pasta. It's like, I know if I eat a bowl of pasta, I'm not going to be satiated afterwards. I'm going to want to eat more and more and more. But if I eat, this whole bunch of broccoli, then I'm going to be satiated afterwards, and I can move on with my day. And just having that discussion, the 30-minute thought process, to become mindful about what it is that you're eating, I think that's like 3/4 of the battle just there, is becoming mindful. And all the time patients come in and they're like, we're really never hungry in the mornings, or, we just weren't hungry at dinner, so we just didn't eat. Or, it's so easy to turn down that bread now because I realize that, that bread's going to make me feel terrible. And if it's lunchtime, then I don't want to feel terrible for the rest of the day because I've got all this other stuff to do. So just having that sort of engagement with your food and with your body, it makes a big difference. A lot of people feel empowered when they actually are mindful, and they realize that they're not hungry, so they don't need to eat. I have a family medicine resident who sort of shadows with us periodically. And he's so interested about fasting and fitness, and his father's a personal trainer. And he came in and he's like, I'm going to fast. And then a few days later when he came back, he said, you know what? Last night I turned down food for the first time in my life because I didn't want it, and I didn't need it. And I knew I didn't need it. And he said, I felt so good about myself for actually knowing what my body needed for the first time in my life. So I think just being mindful is just sort of the best thing anybody could do. And with snacking is the second biggest thing. I have one patient, and I swear Oreos, brownies, coffee cake, Big Mac, French fries. That's her diet. And she's on insulin, and she definitely needs to lose a bunch of weight. And she pretty much straight up said, my diet's not going to change. Her arthritis is so bad she can't cook, and she can barely walk. And She's like, these are going to be my foods, so help me. And I said, okay, well, record a food diary. So she brought me back her food diary, and yeah, she's eating crap, but she's eating it all day long. And I had to write down the time. So that was the key with the food diary and her. I was like, write down when you eat. And I said, I already know what you're going to eat, so don't fear for coming in. I'm not going to yell at you, but write down when you're actually eating. So she's like refeeding like every 30 minutes. So we talked about scaling it down to like two-hour eating windows in the day. And from just doing that, she had a 60% reduction in her insulin, and she dropped 30 pounds.